Well, hello and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Benedict Rogers, an interview series produced by Hong Kong Watch. And it's a really great privilege and pleasure to welcome as our guest this week, Desmond Shum. Desmond was a major investor in China, the developer of the largest air cargo logistics facility in China, among other things, but is the author of this remarkable new book, which I read recently, Red Roulette, an insider's story of wealth, power, corruption, and vengeance in today's China. Desmond, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Can I start by asking you if you could tell us why you wrote Red Roulette?
Well, it started beginning of 2018 because my ex-wife, we divorced back in 2014-ish, and then I left for England about 15, 16. And then she was disappeared by the state of China, September 5th, 2017. So as time drags on, I thought it's important to tell our story to my son. So that was the beginning of the project at the early 2018. And yes.
Mentioning your wife's disappearance is of course very timely at this moment with the case of the tennis star Peng Shuai. This is a regime that makes a habit of disappearing people, isn't it?
Yes. I do see a lot of similarity with the situation with Peng Shuai. It's, both are related to senior political figures. In our case, we have a business partnership with the wife of the then premier Wen Jiabao at the time. Peng Shuai's situation is she made a sexual assault accusation against former deputy premier Zhang Gaoli, whom actually we were known when we met. So and then that's the situation with China is that's new rule of law, and that's no due process, and their first reaction of running into inconvenience facts is they silence it and try to make it go away. That's their first reaction in general, always.
Absolutely. You spent many years doing business in China under successive party leaderships. How would you say Xi Jinping has changed China during his time in power?
I think the first is the political situation at the highest level. In the past, I think since Jiang Zemin's time, Jiang Zemin has a administration ruling over 13 years. Hu Jintao is about 10. So over a quarter of a century, essentially, it's a division of power and within the standing committee. So each member of the standing committee has their own sort of sphere of influence, and then there is a coordination and compromise among all of them. The party chairman sort of is first among equal, but he doesn't rule over everyone. I think Xi Jinping has changed that, and then today, I think today's China, it's a one-man dictatorship. So I think in that sense, it's a very, very different. And on the economy and the society at large, I think Jiang Zemin continued from the quote-unquote reformer opening at the beginning of change in China under Deng Xiaoping, continues that trend. I think by Hu Jintao on the first 5 years of his first term, I think it's generally in continuing that trend. I think that trend start changing after the 2008 financial crisis. And I think Xi Jinping is completely on a different path in a way. We sort of see him even at the beginning of his administration, he sees himself, I think he's self-appointed as, Chinese dynasties. Usually you have the energetic founders of dynasty, and inevitably there's some ebbs. And then you have some emperor come along and say, well, I will revive this dynasty and then rebuild the foundation for the longer term. I think he's self-appointed that role, and he is, I do see him as doing a social and re-engineering program of a massive scale on China. So he is restructuring the society and restructuring economy, and in a situation of a one-man dictatorship, that is without consultation with different stakeholders. It is a very dangerous project for everybody.
Absolutely. You describe in the book how you were at one stage quite hopeful that China would democratize, would open up politically. Did I understand that correctly? And if that was the case at one point, how do you see the future now?
I think in the 90s, even the early 2000s, I think everybody in China it's going with the expectation that China were going to converge with the rest of the world, especially the West. We're going to be, more democratic. We will be more rule of law based society. It's just that the only debate going on in this country was the pace of change, the pace of that convergence. I think after the financial crisis, I detail in the book how things has changed in my life with party apparatus coming to my company, party secretary assigned to my company. Things start changing back then. They sort of seeing that the China model, they see that the communist China model may not be that bad, and they question the valence of a convergence with the West. So so the path of divergence already happened back in 2008 and 2009, back after the financial crisis. I think Xi Jinping just really taken that divergence, the speed of divergence on another pace, and it's completely going a different route from the rest of the, let's say, Western democratic countries.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier not just the changes politically, but the changes to the economy. Xi Jinping has talked about a common prosperity drive. How do you view the economic path that he's taking China on?
I think it's a common prosperity is just one part of it. The starting point is, the slogan that he goes on start with its last 10 years is he keep referring to our original intent, right? The original intent of the party. And you look at it, how he defined the original intent is the party work for the happiness and well-being of the people and for the strength and wealth of the nation. So the common prosperity will be part of the first phase, right? For the sort of by his definition for the people part. Rich will be, if you look at what he had done really, I think to surprise to many people is what he had done to the education sector. The tutoring industry was wiped out, and then what he's doing to the real sector with a great ramification throughout the economy. It is part of that program, because for a couple of decades, that that's a saying within China, say there's 3 mountains on the back of the people, and the 3 mountains are housing price, medical, and education. So he has act on 2 of them. Although he act on them, in his own way, he's, lessening the burden of the people. So in a way, I do see him sort of, if you put in a positive light, he's a romantic leftist. But the last time, China, but a romantic leftist sit on top of Lenin's dictatorship party And the last time we have a romantic leftist is Mao Zedong. And look at what Mao gave it us. So it is a very, I think it's the way he's changing the status quo is a very dangerous situation. And then it will, for all participants of the economy, whether it's entrepreneur, foreign investor included, it is you build your business, you build your business model based on the status quo, right? So if you are changing the status quo in the fundamental way, then that makes your business model invalid. So the question now is, where is taking it? Because there's no consultation with the rest of the stakeholder of the society, and it's a dictatorship. You really don't know what the end game is. So that makes your planning for your business and designing for your business, it's very difficult, if not impossible.
Absolutely. Can I ask your views specifically on the case of Evergrande and how significant the Evergrande situation is and what that will mean for the economy?
I think, if it just one, despite, obviously Evergrande, we all know we are talking about a single real estate company with a debt of about 400 billion RMB, 400 billion, 3 trillion US, which is about half a trillion US. Yes, it's a tremendous amount of debt. But it's one single company. The issue really is it's a bellwether on the real estate industry, which is a significant part and has been a significant one. I think it's two major issues here. One is it has been a significant part of economic contributor of economic growth over the past, I would say, 20 years. So you're taking out that part of the growth engine. What's the ramification of that? The second part, I think it's an even more bigger issue, actually, I may say, is real estate housing has been sort of a financial instrument of holding for most households, if not all, most households in China, because the stock market is so volatile, people generally don't want to touch it. Your banks is, the inflation is eating into your saving. And in the past, the housing price has been on this steady rise. And so people generally see buying houses almost as a mean of saving. So when bulk of the wealth of people's household saving, households are stored in housing, if you see, let's even not talk about a collapse of pricing, a major decline of price, that will destroy a lot of wealth of the society. And with that wealth, it has major implication on consumption. So I think those are the two bigger issue, or then, which Evergrande is a bellwether of the situation.
Thank you. Can I turn now to the role of the West, and particularly if I stay with the economic theme for the moment, we'll come back to the political approaches. In terms of Western investors in China, how do you think, what do you think of the risks now versus the benefits of investing in China, and also the role of Western investors in, are they effectively propping up a regime that is severely violating human rights on a systematic scale? How do you view the future for Western investment and the risks and the questions of ethics involved?
I think it's let me just put the ethics aside for now, because once we get into ethics, then that's a question of capital. We are in a capitalist society. How do we deal with that? It is a very valid debate, but it's a completely different debate with a lot of corporates and investors. Just talking about from an economic point of view. I think from an economic point of view, one thing I mentioned earlier is that this massive change, sort of shifting of the ground under your feet of the status quo. I think that's definitely a major issue. And then just look at, what happened with, let's Temasek, right? It's one of the biggest investor in Chinese tech sector by far, I think. And it's the longest term investor in China's tech sector by a mile. They have been in China investing in Chinese companies. I dealt with them back 20 years ago. So they say they are halting all the investment into Chinese technology company, technology sector until sort of the situation clarifies. Just to give an example. And then I think that's one, it is a good indicator, and it just, what happened, actually it just happened in the last couple of weeks, actually. The other issue is what happened actually just last couple of days is there's Taiwanese company, one of the major Taiwanese company being fined under different pretexts for about 15 million US because they support the DMT, the ruling political party in Taiwan. They gave a political donation. So China has brazenly basically interfering in different, holding hostage of the company, interfering in other countries' politics. But it's very likely, they would do the same thing to any other company, right? If Australian company today, they have a trade war going in Australia, and so if you're a major Australian company investing in China, they say, well, if you are doing certain things in Australia we don't like, we will censure your assets and your operation in China. So I think that those are very alarming signals to all investors and all companies investing in China, because that hasn't happened in the past. The other question I keep raising to all, especially financial investor into China, the situation with China right now is because of it really depends on politics, right? Because he has this social engineering program going on. We are aware of it, that the tech company was wiped out about 2 trillion market cap of the Chinese, in the US actually, of all the major tech company within weeks, right? The tutoring industry, a bunch of them are listed in the US, was down 90% in a week because of the new regulations. Just yesterday, because of some rumor of a new tax going to go on in the digital tax into the tech company, I think the top 6 company was down about 40 billion just yesterday. So a lot of it is all about politics, and that's asset managers, fund manager, your specialty is industry analysis, corporate analysis, competition landscape analysis. But what's happening, and then what's the deciding factor of the value of what you're investing had nothing to do with your competency. It's all about Chinese politics. Then I'm questioning which of the asset managers has expertise in the field of politics in China. So let's just leave the ethics aside. I'm asking on fundamental competency. What's your competency as a financial investor in the, investing to Chinese market today?
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a really important question. Just turning to the politics of the situation, what's your view of the West as a whole, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, EU, in terms of their approach to China? And do you think that they are at long last waking up to the dangers that this regime poses? And if they are, how do you think they should be approaching the challenge of this regime?
I think countries around the world in general, especially all these Chinese neighboring countries, and I think most of them, I wouldn't say all actually, most of the democratic country has awakened up to the threats of China posed to the global system. Actually, it's just not, they have a bigger ambition than territorial. What they're doing to Taiwan, what they're doing in South China Sea. Xi Jinping has a long advocate as well, the common human faith. He's advocating the China model could be a model for the rest of the world, isn't it? I think so. I think the political entity of the world, many of them are awakened to the threat China poses. I think for many of them, the issue is what is the executable policies that we can pursue to deal with a second largest economy of the world, but it's possibly a hostile entity. I think that's a difficulty most people faces. Is what's my policies I can possibly adopt to that will defend myself, trying to limit the influence of China into my system, but at the same time not going to antagonize China too much. They're going to come after me. I think that's what every country is now dealing with, except America, because they are the number one economy. So they have and then they have the military might, so they can be more out the front, so to speak.
Yeah. We'll come back to Taiwan in a moment, but you spent much of your life in Hong Kong. You grew up in Hong Kong. What are your reflections on what has happened to Hong Kong now in the last couple of years, particularly with the national security law, and whether it can maintain its status as an international financial center, given the dismantling of its freedoms and indeed the undermining of an independent judiciary and the rule of law, all the values that made it a successful financial center?
I think, well, first of all, I think the Hong Kong I known growing up, it's gone. I mean, it's gone. It's becoming one of the cities of China. It is just, I think that's a straight up threat. I think China as, Hong Kong as a financial center, global financial center, in the long term will dwindle. I'm sure the importance of it will go down. I mean, it will become a financial center for Chinese companies, but not going to be a global financial center. That's question. I think that's long-term wise that it's not going to be very viable, especially if your independent judiciary is in question. And I have serious doubt. I mean, we are seeing what's happening in Hong Kong, or the sentence they have given out, just by all rationale, it's unexplainable. So with our independent judiciary, I don't see how it can be a global financial center in the long term.
On the question of Taiwan, we've seen, as you alluded to a moment ago, a real ratcheting up of pressure from Beijing on Taiwan. Unprecedented numbers of fighter jets flying over Taiwan, much more aggressive language. Where do you think that is all heading? What do you think is the likely scenario in the next few years with Taiwan?
Well, I'm not, first of all, I have to say I'm no military expert. So that's a lot of that I can't really, I wouldn't say I have expertise on. What I possibly can comment on is my understanding of Chinese politics, based on my understanding of Chinese politics. I think how China has been posturing towards Taiwan, it's one side of it's one issue to consider. The internal danger and how dangerous it is, how likely China will attack Taiwan is, I think it's really you need to look at how, I think that the one of the signs I will personally look at is stabilization of the military leadership in China. Because what happened is, a few years ago when I look at it is, I talk about it, marshal generals, the highest ranking of military generals in China, it's about 20, low 20s. And then Xi Jinping had arrested and demoted about 15 of the 21, 22. And, and then even now, he's still constantly, after 10 years now into his regime, he's still constantly demoting and shifting people around at the most senior level. Even only, I think, a month, last couple of weeks, he shifted the head of the northwest region, because China has 5 military regions, to the southeast part, which is directly opposing Taiwan. And then there's still a lot of rest going on in the military. I think until that stabilized, once that it's actually stabilized, and they give it some time after the stabilization, then you say, well, okay, that military can actually, it's ready possibly for action. Because at the moment, what he's doing is basically cleansing the military of, he arrested, 2 deputy chair of the military commission, which is unprecedented over the last, since, Cultural Revolution. And so with that going on, he's cleansing the military and then trying to put in his loyalists into the military. And then he's very paranoid, and then rightly so. So until that situation stabilized, I doubt that already the army is ready for action.
That's very interesting. There is an argument that some people make that Xi Jinping really wants to leave a legacy that might put him on the level of Mao Zedong in Chinese history, and some people say that legacy would be the reunification of Taiwan with the mainland. Do you think that is his ambition?
I think he's. If you look at he has this history document came out in the last couple of weeks. Right? The 1, 2, 3, the third history interpretation of the CCP, right? And that's if you read into that document, it's that ambition is definitely there. The question is, does he think he's capable? I mean, but first, I think that ambition is a lot more real now today compared to Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao. They are in their time. I think they put sort of lip service to the cause, and not because China doesn't have the capability at that time. And now Xi Jinping seems like he's a lot more ambition about this, as setting this as a goal, and also China is obviously militarily is a lot more capable today than any time in the past.
Yeah. Can I ask a penultimate question before we come to a final question to conclude? Coming back to the question of investment, and you answered this earlier from an economic point of view, but is it possible in China today to do business with China in a way that is ethical and is independent of the state, independent of the party? Or is it the case, given the presence of the party in so many companies, that's no longer possible? What's your view on that?
I think it was independent of state. To do business in China, independent of not state, independent of CCP, was never an option, because every bureaucrat is a party member and they run by the rule of the party. So that was never an option, just historically. I think what happened under Xi Jinping is, if you just look at the statistic, he has set up more party cells throughout the economy and throughout the society than any time in the past, in the past few decades. So every company, if you have more than 3 party members, you need to set up a party cell, and I think it's inevitable. The party, because also dictatorship, all bureaucrats get more paranoid, so they want to act on caution, which is inevitable lead to more interference in the operation of all companies.
Thank you. A final question, looking to the future. Xi Jinping has changed the constitution. He's ended term limits. He's added Xi Jinping thought to the constitution. Are we going to see Xi Jinping in power for the rest of his life? Or is it possible to see change from within the party for the better?
Well, I think, one thing I talk about what he done in the past decade, it makes the situation more dangerous for all stakeholders, which actually includes himself. A dictator is always paranoid because people don't like a dictator, including the people who supposedly he supported. I think it is situation. I'm not sure about how long he wants to stay in power, but he's sort of like, China has this saying, once you are riding on the back of a tiger, you cannot get off, right? Because the moment you get off, the tiger gonna kill you. So he is sort of in that situation. He has arrested and prosecuted over 4 million bureaucrats over the last decade. And that's an astonishing number. 4 million bureaucrats, and everybody have previous supporter, previous associates, and they all have agenda against what he's, so the latent against Xi Jinping. So the latent discontent and in many cases hatred on him is tremendous. That's one of the reason he can step off. And then the other thing is he systematically wiped out any possible successor, and they didn't name any successor, because the moment you name a successor, the power starts shifting. People who say, well, I cannot attach myself to you, I will attach to the next guy coming, and then power start to shift. And so he doesn't want that. But not having a successor, and then he's 70 years old, it is a dangerous situation that China never had for the quarter of a century. We always name successor in place. So if for whatever reason, he is incapacitated for extended period, whether somebody put a bullet in him, or he has a heart attack, or some other major health issues, that it will be a mess, because there's quite a few people will say, well, I have the right as much as the next guy to be the head of this CCP. And then look at the brutality of a cleansing went through in the last decade. The successor into the Standing Bureau named by Hu Jintao, Lin Jihua, he was put in behind bars. The name, supposedly one of the two named successor, Sun Zhengcai, he was put in behind bars. And the princeling Bo Xilai, he was put as another political rival, Xi Jinping. He is put in behind bars. And then two deputy chair of the military commission that we talked about earlier. So that the brutality of the cleansing is unprecedented. So people on the next fight say, well, if I don't get this job, it's not me, it's me, my associates, my underlining, my family will be in trouble. The fight will be to a bitter end. And that's a very dangerous situation for China. And then rich is a situation Xi Jinping, because of his wish to have a dictatorial power, has set up the China political system to be at this moment. Which is something I think all investors or policymakers around the world need to keep that in mind and then look into it.
Absolutely. Well, there's so many other questions that I could ask you, and so much more we could talk about, but we're almost out of time. So on that note, thank you so much, Desmond Shum, for joining us. To our viewers, I should say, if you have not yet read Red Roulette, I highly recommend it. It's an important book to help understand what is happening in China today and what's happening with the Chinese Communist Party today. So Desmond Shum, thank you for writing the book, and thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you for all the good work you're doing for Hong Kong. I thank you for that.
Thank you very much.